No, all the blemishes are there. You know, you see your life flash before your eyes just before you pass away. I don't think I'm dead yet.
They say your life flashes before your eyes before it ends. But for Jon Bon Jovi, it was something else flashing before him. His legacy, his voice, everything he ever worked for, slipping away. What tragic diagnosis brought the iconic rock star to tears? And how did he nearly lose everything, including his life on stage? Title screen, Jon Bon Jovi's heartbreaking diagnosis, the story you didn't know. The dreamer from New Jersey. Before the world tours, before the screaming fans, before the heartbreak, there was just a kid from New Jersey, John Francis Bon Jovi Jr., born to a working-class family, the son of a barber and a former Marine. From a young age, John was obsessed with music. Talent shows, contests, garage bands, he was in it all. But the path to stardom wasn't smooth. By the early 1980s, rejection was all he knew. Label after label slammed the door in his face. Rock is overcrowded, your sound's not strong enough. He was broke, invisible, and desperate. From janitor to breakthrough. While scrubbing floors in a New York studio, John had one dream. For someone, anyone, to hear his music. And one day, they did. A local DJ played his song Runaway. And suddenly, the phones wouldn't stop ringing. John had his first hit, but the climb had just begun. The birth of Bon Jovi. John gathered the best musicians he knew, David Bryan, Alec John Such, Tico Torres, and Richie Sambora. Together, they became Bon Jovi. They toured relentlessly, sleeping on floors, surviving on scraps, driven by one thing, the dream. Their breakout moment came in 1986 with Slippery When Wet, a global sensation. From magazine covers to sold-out stadiums, Bon Jovi was on top of the world. But success came at a cost. After 230 shows across continents on the New Jersey tour, John was exhausted, physically and emotionally broken. He wasn't just a rock star, he was the engine of Bon Jovi, the writer, the frontman, the manager. And the weight, unbearable. By 1991, John confessed he was on the edge. Driving along the Pacific Coast Highway, he contemplated ending it all. "I was a mess," he said. "I was as low as I could imagine." Collapse on stage. Then it happened. Mid-concert, John's body shut down. Legs weak, breath heavy, mind clouded. He collapsed in front of thousands. Medics rushed him off stage. He had nothing left to give. This was the wake-up call. He wasn't invincible. The price of perfection had caught up. Cracks in the band. After that, the band slowed down, but tensions were boiling underneath. Richie Sambora, John's brother-in-arms, was growing distant. In 2013, during the Because We Can tour, he vanished. No call, no explanation, just gone. Fans were stunned. John was furious. He felt betrayed. What followed was a public feud that shook the fandom to its core. Brothers at war. They built Bon Jovi together. They reigned together. But now, it was war. John accused Richie of walking out. Richie said he was choosing family over burnout. For 5 years, they didn't speak. When Richie returned for the Rock Roll Hall of Fame ceremony in 2018, fans hoped it was a reunion, but it wasn't. It was a goodbye. Because for a man whose life was built on his voice, losing it wasn't an option. And yet, that's exactly what began to happen. The voice that changed everything. In 2022, fans started noticing something different. John's performances felt off. The voice that once shook arenas now struggled to hit the high notes. At first, many thought it was just fatigue. After all, Bon Jovi had been touring for decades, barely taking breaks. But as the shows went on, things didn't get better. They got worse. John began lowering the keys of songs, avoiding difficult parts, adapting his entire singing style just to get through the night. Some fans were forgiving, others brutal. The internet buzzed with speculation. Was he losing it? Should he retire? But John knew the truth. This wasn't aging. It was something more. Facing the truth. After a show in Nashville in 2022, John asked the one person who'd always been honest with him, his wife, Dorothea, "How did I do?" Her answer hit him harder than any critic ever could. She told him plainly, "It wasn't your best. Your voice didn't sound right." Then came the backlash. Clips from that performance went viral. People mocked him. Commentators said he was washed up. Others demanded answers. And that's when Jon decided to confront it head-on. He saw specialists, ran tests, and finally, the diagnosis came. The heartbreaking diagnosis. Jon Bon Jovi was diagnosed with a condition called vocal atrophy, a degenerative issue that causes the vocal fold muscles to thin and weaken. In Jon's case, one vocal cord had thickened, the other had weakened. The imbalance was destroying his control over pitch, tone, and strength. For a singer, this diagnosis is a nightmare. Jon later admitted in interviews that he began to question everything, even his faith. He said, "I pride myself on being a real vocalist. I've sung with Pavarotti. I know how to sing. I've studied the craft for 40 years. So when God started taking that away, I couldn't understand why." He even joked, "The only thing that's ever been up my nose is my finger. So this doesn't make sense." It was a painful reality. But Jon wasn't done yet. The surgery. Instead of giving up, Jon made a bold decision. In June 2022, he underwent vocal fold medialization surgery, a delicate and risky procedure. The goal? To restore balance between the vocal cords and possibly save his voice. Recovery wouldn't be fast, and it wouldn't be easy. Jon had to relearn how to use his voice, not like a beginner, but like a master, starting over from zero. Rebuilding from scratch daily vocal exercises, breathing techniques, voice therapy, everything had to change. Jon trained with vocal coaches, watched every sound, every breath. He even found comfort in fellow artist Shania Twain, who had undergone a similar surgery. Her encouragement helped him believe that there might still be hope. But it was slow, frustrating, and terrifying. Because no matter how famous you are, no matter how many records you've sold, you can't cheat biology. A new chapter begins. By mid-2024, Jon began testing his voice on stage again. Small performances, controlled settings. Then came the big moment. In June 2024, Bon Jovi released their 16th studio album titled Forever. It marked 40 years of Bon Jovi, and it was Jon's first major project after surgery. The album was more than just music. It was proof that he wasn't finished. Fans listened closely, and while his voice wasn't exactly the same as it was in the 80s or 90s, it was strong, it was clear, it was Jon. In interviews, he admitted that he still had a long road ahead, but he also said this: "I'm not here to deliver average. I'm here to give my best. Whatever it takes, I'll do it. Not just for the fans, but for me." Just when Jon Bon Jovi thought the worst was behind him, another blow hit. Not a critic, not a fan, but something no one could have predicted. A virus, a test, and a moment that left him silenced. Literally. This is the chapter most people missed. The quiet collapse before the world knew what was really happening. The night it all changed. It was October 30th, 2021. Jon Bon Jovi was in Miami, Florida. Fans had gathered for a special fan event, an intimate show, a night to remember. Backstage, Jon was preparing like he always did, focused, ready, until someone walked in with a clipboard and a test result, positive, a routine COVID-19 test. And suddenly, Jon wasn't just off stage. He was off the radar. He had to leave immediately. No performance, no goodbyes. His bandmates continued the show without him, trying to fill in the silence. Jon was isolated, physically and emotionally, as the virus took hold. At the time, he downplayed it, said he felt fine, that his symptoms were mild, that he'd be back soon. But what he didn't know was that this wasn't just a short delay. It was another turning point in a story already filled with pain. COVID and the voice. By the time Jon caught COVID-19, fans had already noticed his voice had been changing. There were cracks in the high notes, strain in the choruses, moments where the energy dropped unexpectedly. Many blamed age. Some pointed to over-touring. But after COVID, things got worse. Even though he recovered physically, his voice didn't bounce back the way it used to. In fact, the 2022 tour made it painfully clear. Jon Bon Jovi was in trouble. Each night, his voice struggled to keep up. Notes were missed. Pitches wavered. And fans, who had once screamed with joy, now watched with concern. Some even began to wonder, had the virus damaged his voice permanently? The unseen damage. Medical experts have warned about COVID's long-term effects on the respiratory system, even vocal cords. And in Jon's case, the timing was brutal. He was already battling vocal atrophy. COVID added more stress to already fragile vocal muscles, and worst of all, it slowed his recovery. In interviews, Jon never publicly blamed COVID, but those closest to him say it marked a distinct turning point. His vocal issues intensified, recovery dragged, frustration grew. It was no longer just about singing again. It was about whether he could perform at all. Jon's response. But Jon Bon Jovi has never been one to fold. Instead of hiding, he got to work. He doubled down on vocal rehab, extended his recovery timeline, worked with more specialists, and most of all, he adapted. He accepted the possibility that he might never sound like 1986 again, but he refused to let that stop him from doing what he loves. He focused on storytelling, on clarity, on making every word count, even if the high notes were gone. He said it himself. I've been through decades of change. This is just another one. And if I have to fight for my voice, I will. A new era. In 2024, Jon finally returned to the studio with something to prove. Not just that he could still sing, but that he could still matter. The result? Bon Jovi's 16th studio album, Forever. Recorded after surgery, after COVID, after everything. The album became a symbol of resilience. The lyrics were personal. The melodies were focused. The voice? Not perfect, but powerful in its authenticity. It wasn't the 80s version of Jon Bon Jovi. It was the 2024 version. Wiser, weathered, but still standing. Will he ever tour again? That's the question fans are still asking. Jon has said he wants to take it slow. That if he does return to touring, it has to be on his terms. No rushing, no pressure, no pushing beyond what's healthy. He's committed to quality, not just quantity. For now, he's performing selectively, testing himself, watching his limits. But there's one thing he's made clear. He's not finished. A message to fans. Jon Bon Jovi's journey isn't just about music. It's about endurance, about knowing when to rest, when to fight, and when to let go of the past to embrace what's next. To the fans who've stood by him, even when his voice faltered, even when the headlines were harsh, he's deeply grateful. Because when the lights dim and the roar fades, it's the connection with the audience that remains. And that's something no diagnosis can take away. He battled rejection, built a global empire, faced total collapse, and then fought his way back from vocal cord deterioration. But Jon Bon Jovi's journey wasn't just about surviving physical illness. It's about what happens when you lose your purpose and still choose to rise. In this final chapter, we explore the emotional aftermath, his plans for the future, and what legacy Jon Bon Jovi is leaving behind. Not just as a rock star, but as a human being. Recovery was just the beginning. When Jon emerged from vocal surgery in 2022, his battle wasn't over. It had just changed form. Gone were the stadium lights, gone were the roaring crowds. What remained was silence and doubt. He faced mirrors, he faced critics, but most of all, he faced himself. Jon had to answer the question every artist fears. If I can't do this like I used to, should I still do it at all? Redefining the mission. For Jon Bon Jovi, music was never just about sound, it was about connection. In the months following surgery, he shifted focus, not toward fame, but toward intention. He began mentoring younger musicians, consulting with producers, and spending more time writing, not for charts, but for truth. He even considered stepping back entirely, but fans weren't ready to say goodbye, and neither was he. The album that almost didn't happen. Jon admitted in interviews that Forever, the 2024 album, almost didn't happen. I didn't know if I could sing again, he said. I didn't know if I even wanted to try. But something changed when he returned to the studio. In those quiet sessions, stripped of the crowd, stripped of ego, he found clarity. The songs poured out, not flashy, not formulaic, but honest. Tracks like Living Proof and Hollow Echo became statements, not of comeback, but of courage. Forever became a tribute to survival, to reinvention, to everything he had lost and still had left. The fans who never left. While critics speculated about the end, millions of fans around the world were doing the opposite. They were showing up, streaming the new tracks, sharing messages, posting throwback videos, wearing Bon Jovi shirts like armor. And Jon noticed. He said, "When I couldn't trust my voice, I trusted the fans. They didn't ask me to be perfect, they just asked me to keep going." That energy, that support, became fuel. And slowly, show by show, Jon began stepping back into the light. Where is Jon Bon Jovi now? As of mid-2025, Jon remains cautious about full-scale touring. But he's not hiding. He's made surprise appearances, performed short acoustic sets, and most importantly, stayed transparent. He posts updates, speaks openly about his vocal health, and refuses to fake anything for the cameras. He's also been deeply involved in his Soul Foundation, helping homeless youth and low-income families across the US. To Jon, giving back now feels just as important as giving a performance. Facing the future. When asked what's next, Jon answers with a smile. "I'm not chasing chart positions, I'm chasing meaning." He's open to new collaborations, considering producing for others, even experimenting with podcasting and documentaries. He may not tour 100 cities again, but don't mistake that for retreat. Jon Bon Jovi is still creating, still inspiring, still fighting, and that, in its own way, is more powerful than any encore. Legacy beyond music, more than the platinum records, more than the sold-out arenas. Jon Bon Jovi's legacy may be this, that he showed the world how to age with grace, how to struggle publicly without shame, and how to rebuild when the one thing you built your life around begins to break. In a world obsessed with perfection, he showed us that resilience, not image, is what truly lasts. He taught us how to bounce back, how to speak truth, how to keep the music alive, even when the voice fades. Final close. This isn't the story of a man who lost his voice. It's the story of a man who found a new one. And for fans across generations, that voice, in all its imperfect, evolving power, still echoes louder than ever.